Good morning. I'm Tristan Noyes, Executive Director of the Maine Grain Alliance, and we are so excited to have you join us this morning for a webinar to learn from our friend Karen Getz and help us be able to better understand how to market our organic products and take us beyond the farmers market. This webinar, along with a whole host of expert office hours, field days, trips to processors, conferences and events throughout the year are part of a larger program called the Transition to Organic Partnership program, which is a USDA grant that we've been lucky to be a part of with partners like Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association and Pennsylvania Organic for the last couple of years. It's been very rewarding work to connect the dots between all the different parts of the value chain in grains as a accompaniment to our other full slate of programming, which includes the Kneading Conference, which is coming up in the last week of July, which we hope that you'll join us at, the Maine Artisan Bread Fair. Also, we have a robust seed restoration program that helps to take handfuls of carefully kept seed from seed savers all across the world and grow them out to commercial viability. And we support businesses through technical assistance grants and other work to help promote and champion sort of Maine grown grains. So, with that, I would love to introduce Paul Polaro, who's going to give you just a few real quick, minute of the upcoming events that you could look forward to after you attend this event. So,
This will be a speed round because it's a little bit more than a few we got here. Just this upcoming week, there's an office hours session with Tom Malloy on the basics of organic grain production. Um, on the 17th, that's this Friday, we have a workshop with Raphael Meyer and Dusty Dowse on masa and tortilla making. And the Friday, Saturday is our Organic Grain and Seed Summit. It's going to be a big event, mostly on Saturday in Hinckley, Maine, at Kennebec Valley Community College. And I'll send all the details in the chat in just a minute here. April 29th, we got a grain processor field day at the Good Crust Pizza Maker in Canaan. Uh, May 29th, we have the same type of event, a processor visit at Heiwa Tofu, which is interesting. We're kind of venturing a little bit out of grains here. The very next day, May 30th, there's a field day at Crystal Springs Farm with Seth Croak on integrating organic grains on a vegetable farm. Kind of talking about how to get into the grain industry. And then July 8th, we have a field day at Rogers Farm at UMaine with Tom Malloy again. And I'll send all those registration links here in the chat.
Thank you, Paul. Um, you can see that we're busy for the next little bit and in all the best ways. So, thank you for being a part of it this morning. And thanks to those who aren't able to be here to join us via watching this later on as part of our YouTube channel. But with that, I want to introduce Karen Getz, who has long been a friend of all things grain and all things food related in Maine and beyond. I know that many of you know Karen as the award-winning food innovator. She's a bread baker. She's an acclaimed cheesemaker. She's a longtime advocate for local farms and regional food systems. She's been at this work for decades and has helped to bring about really innovative businesses and a new slate of a new business as well, which maybe she'll touch upon in short order. She's the founder, along with her family, of Maine Crisp Company, which I think we started back in, was it maybe 2014, 15, somewhere in there, Karen?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was just at the beginning of when I started as executive director. And I remember touring the new facility when you switched over to the new one and being really inspired by
hmm
how this your business was scaling and creating all of these amazing consumer packaged goods and marketing to, folks outside of Maine, which is something that is an exciting thing to learn from you about. So, um, she's been written up in Bon Appetit, Food and Wine, so for all the different great organizations. So we're super, super lucky to have you, Karen, as a friend of Maine Grain Alliance. With that, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Tristan. Hi, everyone. Really appreciate Maine Grain Alliance inviting me to speak today. And I was looking forward to sharing my story and what I've learned along the way. So before we get started, I was just curious, how many of you have a food product in the market right now? If you could show your hands, raise your hand if you do. Super. How many of you are thinking about a food product and would like to bring something to market? Okay, great. Great. So anyway, it's great to be here. I feel like this is a bunch of kindred spirits. And with that, let's get started. Let's see, let me pull this. Hang on. Share my screen. Do we have presenter mode? No, I need presenter mode. Hang on one sec.
While Karen's pulling that up, I will also share that there are a few slots available still. Some folks have signed up for the one-on-one consultation time. We have some spots available, so if you'd like to take advantage of that, you can message either Kenyon, Paul, or I in the chat, and we'll get you set up.
All right, so you can see my screen?
We can see your screen and notes.
And notes. Okay. My helpful notes. Great. This worked last yesterday. All right, we'll do it without if we have to. Stop sharing.
Every presentation I ever give, it's always this. It's presenter mode. Trying to figure that out. It's like every time that's the hiccup.
We tested it last night, but
well, the problem is also with Zoom and Google Meet, and then like all the other things, they all work differently.
I can see that.
Yep, that looks great.
Right, so you can see that, and we don't have any presenter notes.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Wow. All right. Well, welcome everybody. I will do my best. I'm pretty good at remembering, but anyway. So let's get started. So I have a history of food. My family has a history of food. We are a bunch of foodies, and we love creating, sharing, exploring. We joke about like food hobbies that got out of hand and started a business, but really a lot of it's very intentional. And I think it's because we test so many things that, it's fun for us. But anyway, so what I want to share with you today is my experience bringing products to market. I do not have a marketing background or a sales background. I learned on the job. But I set up Maine Crisp with the intention of it becoming a national brand. And so far, it is a national brand, and it's been in the market now for 12 years. And so some of those original customers that I had way back in 2014, they're still on the shelves. So some of the things I'd like to share today is that experience, problems that I had and solved in the process, a process for market discovery, the importance of your brand. This was something that I did not understand when I first got started, and ways to introduce your product to customers. Okay, so many of you know my most recent experience is from going from home kitchen to Costco. So I had an idea for something to utilize buckwheat, and when we had moved to Maine in 2014, and I wanted to start something that could utilize things that were grown in Maine, and also understood that Maine is a very tiny market, and that I would need to create something that I could export out of Maine to many more buyers. It's hard as a small business because everything costs you more, so you're premiumly priced right out of the chute. But there are ways to as you grow, work that out. We can cover some of that. But I founded and grew Maine Crisp. Buckwheat crackers were a new category in the gluten-free category. So when you refer to a category or a set, so the crackers are a category, the set is all the crackers on the shelves in the store. And now there are 8 SKUs of buckwheat crackers coming out of Maine across the country. It secured relationships with Whole Foods coast to coast. We launched in Whole Foods in 2020 in the North Atlantic region, which is about 45 stores in New England. Established relationships with UNFI and KeHE, the 2 largest natural food distributors in the country. And then the products earned SOFI and Nexty awards. And if you're not familiar with those, the SOFI is like from the Specialty Food Association. So it's blind tasting. They're testing your product. There's no packaging to go with it. And it's like an Oscar, but for food businesses. And the Nexty is similar. Maybe it's a Golden Globe. I don't know. But there are 2 expos, the Natural Food Channel. They're on the East Coast and West Coast each year. So it's awards with your peers. You get press from it. So you can't underestimate the power of that third-party validation. I had a wonderful interview by MSNBC. Part of it was sort of overcoming those struggles of wondering, like, why did I think that I could do this? Why did I think I could start a food business? And why did I think it would even go anywhere? And then ended up developing the 2 lines of products and captured retailers everywhere from Italy to Erewhon. And the pictures below, Home Kitchen, First Co-op, SOFI Award, Whole Foods, crackers, and then finally into Costco. And the company's been growing. I left the company in February of 2025, and it's still growing about 100% year over year. So let's talk about your brand identity. This is one area which I really underestimated, right? It's more than a logo and packaging, and that's what I thought that it was. It's your voice, it's your value, it's your, what value are you bringing to the consumer, right? So I picked Stonewall Kitchen because I think they are an iconic Maine brand. And they've done branding really well over the years. And so if we look at this and the questions here, and we look at Stonewall's packaging and product, you have to ask yourself when you're looking at your product, or wanting to create a product, what problem are you solving, right? What is there a need, right? Are there 10 other companies solving the problem? How are you going to differentiate? So when I look at this and understanding when Stonewall Kitchen started, my guess is, I'm guessing here, but the specific problem they solved back in the early 90s was probably because we only had Concord grape or strawberry jam to choose from on the shelf. And what's the promise? A little bit of Maine in every jar. What's in your product and why? Wild Maine blueberries, they've grown here for 10,000 years. How does your product make someone feel? To me, it would make them feel nostalgic, right? Longing for, maybe they grew up in Maine, maybe they vacationed in Maine, maybe they went to summer camp in Maine. I'm always amazed when we've done trade shows, how outside of Maine, how many people realized we were a Maine company and came up and told us about their affinity for Maine. And it was again and again and again. So another big question you need to ask yourself is why? Why should someone care about your product, right? Why? Why should I care? Why should you be different? And some of that could be your story of the farm identity, if you're of growing and making on your farm. What is your founder's story? Is it authentic, right? You have to be able to tell a story. Stories sell. People want to connect with a story. They want to connect with you, and you need to give them a reason to connect. It's more than just, my product has all these attributes, right? What is your voice? What is that behind it? That's what they want. And that leads to also, your brand values. And those values that when you're targeting your core customer, they're going to resonate with them and they're going to want to share your story with their friends. And so you need to be able to answer these questions repeatedly. And I forgot to say, if anybody has any questions in between, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, you can feel free to throw questions in the chat and I'll interrupt Karen on your behalf.
Okay, great. So who's your customer, right? So you have your core consumer. So one of the worst things you could do would be to say, well, I'm making a food product everybody eats, so everybody is potentially my customer, right? And if you try to appeal to everybody like that, you will connect with nobody. And you'll be all over the place trying and trying to sell into the wrong channels to the wrong people, and you will not be able to grow. So this slide is, as Tristan had mentioned, I am working on another business, and this time it is a line of beverages using buckwheat. And this slide came from a deep branding exercise with a local agency and trying to identify who is the customer for Sparklebuck. And Sparklebuck is a sparkling buckwheat tea with botanicals. So who are those? So it was a deep dive into understanding, and this helps to drive, it helps to drive our messaging, it helps to drive our packaging, it helps to drive what channels we need to be in. And when I say channels, that means are you direct to consumer? Are you wholesale to retailers? Are you selling through distribution? Right? Those are your three core channels. And then who else might be? Like, so you're going to have your core consumers, and then you're going to have your consumers that might give it a try. So I would strongly encourage to really understand your core consumer. And another way you could do this, and I did this with Maine Crisp in the early days, I did not have this understanding whatsoever, but I did have some folks that were willing to be taste testers for me. And what I did was I had a questionnaire and samples, and then I chose those taste testers carefully, because it wasn't, again, you're not selling to everybody. So there's no point into selling to somebody who won't like the product or will buy the product. So my first group was to send the samples and questionnaire to friends and family who had celiac disease or gluten intolerance to get their take on what the crisps were like. And then my second set were friends who loved really good cheese and crackers, right? They weren't gluten-free, but they loved good cheese and crackers. And these were designed really to pair with cheese, having been a cheesemaker. It made sense, just a gluten-free version. So getting that feedback from both consumers, I had this feeling like, okay, this is great, because the folks with celiac disease are thrilled to have something, and the folks that don't have celiac disease love them for their flavor and crunch and pairing. So it gave me, the ideas of where to sell into. Like, for some stores, I would be in the gluten-free set. Then it opened up a whole market of cheese shops, right? So I could be in all the cheese shops because they pair so well with cheese. And there weren't really any good gluten-free at that time crackers on the market that paired well with cheese. So let's see. Okay, so this slide, the packaging evolution. And I started small and, started simple. The beauty of having something like a crisp was that I could start in my home kitchen with a kitchen license, and I didn't need refrigeration and I didn't need freezer. That makes a huge difference, because that's a whole nother ball game if you have to be cold chain the whole way. So one of the first things I did was I went into the store and I would look at the cracker set. What does the set look like, right? What are all the products on the market? What are their colors? What are their weights? What are their price points? What are their ingredients? And I had a whole spreadsheet of like, okay, here's who's in that set, who are the competitors, and then what stands out the most, right? Was there a certain colors that really popped and other colors that didn't? Looking at the sizes, were they tall? Were they wide? Were they in plastic? Um, in packaging and in a store, you have 2 to 3 seconds to grab the customer's attention. That's it. If they don't notice your package or they can't identify what it is, they will move on. They're in a hurry. That's all you get. So you want to make sure your packaging is telling you what it is and does it connect? Is there any way to connect emotionally? And I am a huge sucker for packaging that is beautiful, right? I will buy something just because I love the packaging. And if it's not really good on the inside, I'm really disappointed. But for Maine Crisp, I got started with these clear bags on the screen, the little plastic bags. They were inexpensive. They showed the product. I was able to make the label on my desktop and get it printed, and then use this sort of, I don't even remember what that black thing was that sealed them shut. Anyway, it was inexpensive. They were tedious to package, but the customer saw what they were. And, this is where I learned that you really had to be careful about the size, right? Like they had the same amount of product as other crackers in the set, but they were so small because I packed them so tight so they wouldn't break, that people thought that they weren't getting very much, right? Even though the weights were the same and comparable. So, and then I also learned that people are rough. Like in the grocery store, they are rough. They had, I would watch people enjoying demos when they would pick them up. They would squeeze them as they picked them up as if they were angry with them, and they would break them. So I had to like come up with a new package quickly because people don't buy broken product. They'll just let it sit. So I searched for grants, and I found a grant that I could apply for to the Fair Food Network, and I received that grant, and that helped with the first box, listed as the simple box. Now the thing here, it definitely tells more. You can see the broken crisp in the front window, and the window is too big, but it's still like there's things about it that like somebody coming down the grocery store aisle, might not know what it is. And this was a really great design firm, but they weren't a branding firm. And we never went through that exercise of who is your customer. I just wanted something that was easier to package and looked prettier and was more in the size range of other boxes, right? So it was okay to get started with. It was definitely better, but still, it wasn't resonating with the consumer. And then we went through another iteration, and this we worked with same design agency. We wanted to get rid of the window. We wanted to show we were told, everybody has an opinion. You'll learn this, and they. Put your ingredients on the box. That was the thing. And, we were leading with the flavor. And even this package, it resonated a little bit more with people, but it was dark and the colors were dark in the others. And when we took photos of these on the shelf in the store, you realized they did not stand out. And sometimes, even though I knew a certain store carried the crisp, I couldn't find them. And I could be standing right in front of the set and I didn't see them because of the dark packaging. So when we had an interim package in between the crackers and the crisp, which we lightened the package, looked very similar to, and then it popped and it resonated with the customer. We finally had something and we watched literally the sales in Whole Foods go like a hockey stick. It was like something clicked. It was the artwork. It was the brighter color. It just really resonated with the consumer. Some of the things that you want to do, which I did, that were helpful with packaging is, handle it roughly, shake it, drop it from chest height, ship it to, friends on the West Coast if you can. See how it it holds up, right? See how you have to package it, because you might only get one time with a customer, and when they arrive all broken, you may not get that second chance. Another thing that on shelves, you don't want to do weird sizes and formats. So there's a certain area when you're standing in the store, right? It's the shelf at chest height and eye level. Those are your premium placement. That's where you want to try to be. And if you have something that's too small or too large or too awkward, they're going to put you at the top or at the very bottom. So a retailer has what's called a planogram, and you get put into the planogram. And the planogram is basically a map of how this set is going to be set up. And that's why when you go into, for instance, every Hannaford or every Whole Food, the cracker set looks the same, the beverage set looks the same, the cookie set looks the same. That's how it's planogrammed in. And if you have something weird, you're stuck there on the bottom shelf. They're not going to move you, even if you ask, because you decided to have this package. So keep that in mind. Look what the bigger brands are doing, and copy what they're doing as much as you can to be considered in that premium space. Okay, let's see. That was the package evolution. But through that, I would have to say on the crackers and crisps, just to add, we worked with a branding agency on those that really helped us to understand our consumer, and to create packaging that would resonate and catch their attention. So once you capture that attention and they give it a try, lots of times then they'll seek out your story. And if your story resonates with them, then potential customer for life. Okay, let's see. All right, going to market, part 1. So what I did, started locally with people that you know, and I'm doing the same thing with this new business, right? I am going to go deep in my backyard. And when I say backyard, that's New England. And I'm going to focus on New England exclusively. Before going outside of New England, I want to get customers, product known, any packaging changes, maybe even any adjustments to the ingredients or flavors. I want to get that all out there, tested prior to going further, right? So with Maine Crisp, I started with 2 flavors, the wild blueberry and the cranberry. And I tweaked those along the way. And I kept thinking, some of the customers that had them for the entire time would notice, but they didn't. Nobody noticed. I noticed, but nobody noticed. My daughter noticed. But you have to do, getting that feedback. And there's great ways to get the feedback. And one of the best ways is to do events and farmers markets and cheese festival for me, and demo. Like I can't stress enough how the importance of demoing. And I can give you an example. When I first sold to Belfast Food Co-op, right? They immediately bought 4 cases, which was 48 bags. And I told them that, I'd be back in a couple of weeks to demo. So I came back, 3-4 weeks later, and the grocery manager said, we only sold 1 bag, and I think they're too expensive. And I said, okay, well, let's see how the demo goes today. So I went over to the shelf, and they had put them on the very bottom shelf. There was no sign that said new product or local like they do on others. They were just down below. Nobody really would have seen them unless they were taking their time and looking at everything. I sold the other 47 bags in 2 hours. It wasn't the price. It was the location, and it was just an unknown product. And so, you're on the shelf. People don't always know or are paying attention to what's new. So if you can, do as many demos. If you've all been selling at the farmer's market, that's great. What is that feedback, right? Have you been gathering emails, taking notes? You're going to need that data to get into retail. things that I've learned about doing shows. No phones unless you're ringing up a sale. No sitting, no eating. You are there to engage with people and make the most of the dollars that you've spent to be there. And always sample and always encourage people to try. When I'm in the stores doing in-store demos, I encourage staff to come try. If I have extras, I will leave samples for staff, especially co-ops. Co-ops always have staff food tables of samples that come in from vendors through the distributors, because they're your sales team when you're not there. And what you want is them to say, hey, customer asked them something. Oh my gosh, yeah, they were here, they were demoing, these are great. I tried this flavor and that flavor. They're more inclined to buy. I can't stress that enough. And I worked on the retail side for a few years at Middlebury Co-op, and that's not normal. A lot of vendors don't share with staff or encourage them to sample. So co-ops are a natural fit as first stores. You might have a product that would fit into a restaurant as well. We were able to get into some restaurants via cheese plates and charcuterie boards. Another new one that popped up midway, we started selling on fair, I think in 2020, 2019. And it grew to a couple 100,000 a month in sales. And it's a way for many of these specialty retailers to get your product without going through the big distributors. They take a 15% commission and they pay for shipping as well. So those are just some of the ways. Make sure you're posting on social media. Make sure you're before an event, during, after. If you're at an event like the Cheese Festival, tag your neighbors in it. They're more inclined to share your post as well. So let's see. And then, all right, selling into retail and grocery. Let's see. So in the retail space, your buyer could be either the grocery manager, the owner, or a designated buyer. Most of the biggest stores have a designated buying team. Some of the questions that you're going to need to be able to answer are, where is your product made? Do you make it? Are you licensed? What's your best selling product, or what are your top 3 sellers? Can you make enough product? There's nothing worse to a retailer than bringing in a new item. They sell out immediately, and then you are unprepared and go, oh, well, I can't fulfill that for 2 weeks. They hate empty shelves. Don't do that ever. Always have back stock. How do I order? Direct distribution. What's your suggested retail price? And these can be answered simply on a sell sheet. So over on, I have a picture. I had, this is not our real sell sheet, but for Sparkle Bug, but just to give you a general idea of things that you want on there, right? You want your flavors. You want, you're going to need your barcodes, and you're going to need nutrition labels. You're going to need the weights of the package. They're going to know your case size, what are your minimum order quantities, is shipping on top of that. I strongly encourage you to have free shipping, figure it out, or a flat rate shipping. It is frustrating as heck for buyers to have a variation. Like they may want to buy 4 cases in one order, and that's going to be a certain cost for shipping. And then they might want to buy 10 cases in another order. That's going to be a different cost for shipping, and it's going to fluctuate. And they are going to put your product on the shelf at the highest price because of that variation in shipping. They're not going to let it impact their margins. Other things that you can do are, offering of the in-store demos, include shelf talkers if they're willing to put them up. They don't have to be made expensively. You can even make them on a, at home. There's still a shelf talker at our local store here in Waterville, Uncle Dean's, from 2019. I'm amazed. and it doesn't. It's from the darker packaging days. Um, let's see. Offer staff training and sampling. So this is a good one where it might be 15 minutes that you come in, and maybe it's right before you're going to do a demo, but you're introducing the team members to your product, to you, and letting them taste it. And it's golden. Honestly, it's golden. And then off-shelf placement possibilities. What does that mean? So you have your slot in the planogram, but could you be somewhere else? So like the Crisp, we're in the deli in Hannaford. This is a picture from Hannaford Market, and they had put them in these bins in piles, in these round bins, and they looked terrible. We launched into Hannaford's in January of 2020. Again, what a terrible time to launch. And we only got into 10 Hannaford's, and we were direct store delivery and trying to figure out how are we going to make the most of this. And my husband Steve had this idea of, what if we do this shelf? What if we have somebody make these shelves for us, and we put them in the deli area, and we put the Crisp on them? So we prototyped a shelf that would hold 8 cases, and we offered them to Hannaford. We had to go up the chain of command and said, hey, this is a great way for your customers to find our product. We can put them beside a cheese case, and we'll keep them stocked. And that way you don't run out, because they hold 8 cases. So we can come by, and plus that would save us, right? We didn't need to be in there every week. We might have gone then every other week, and you could fit 10 cases on here if you really tried. So it worked. Like, our turns started to pick up because it's an off-shelf placement. So when customers are going through the store, it's something that's kind of in their way, right? So they're going to notice it. And it's been 6 years, and we're now in all of the Hannafords, but it's been 6 years, and those 10 shelves are in the 10 original stores, which is great to see. And one of them is here in Waterville. So, so let's see. Okay, so understand. So another thing you want to understand when you're pitching to a buyer is understand their mindset, right? You are one of many products. You might be one of 5 cookie companies that have approached them this quarter with the best-selling, best ingredient cookie on the market, and that's your pitch. You use these ingredients, you make them on your farm, you're doing this. So why should you have to understand, why should the buyer care? What is your product going to do for them? They have their own numbers that they need to meet in their departments, and how can your product help bring in new consumers, right? And that's where that understanding that mindset, offering these, understanding your numbers. So anything that you've gotten already when you're at a farm market, right? Maybe you have a bestseller. Every week at your farm market, you're selling out of this, and you're selling, 30 units of this every week. That's data. That's data that they would want to know. With that data, that gives credibility to, like, oh, okay, that they'd be willing to give that a try. Because it's all about, in retail, it's all about velocity. And velocity is the number of times your SKU turns per week. So if you have, again, so there's 4 flavors of Crisp in this picture. Each flavor would need to sell roughly 4 units per flavor per week to stay on the shelf. So once you are on that shelf, you have to get yourself off the shelf. And you need 1 reorder is good, 2 reorders is better, 3 reorders, you can start to be like, okay, I think we have some staying power, but it's going to take that. Okay, let's see. Pricing and margins and channel pricing. So I touched on this a little bit earlier. Channel pricing. Channel pricing is what channel you're selling into. Is it direct to consumer? Is it wholesale? Is it distribution? Margins are another one. Retailers deal in margins, not markup. Don't talk markup, talk margins. And margins are just the way. So you're going to have your margin that you need to run your business, and then understand a retailer is going to mark up anywhere from 40 to 50% margin. A distributor is going to put on 25% margin. So, you have to look at those numbers and what that's going to do for your product on the retail shelf. Let's see. Keep a margin calculator on your phone. A margin calculator is your friend. It makes it so easy. When you're calculating your COGS, you want to include your labor. So many other founders that I talked to over the years didn't in the early days, and you have to. Even if you're not paying yourself, you need to include that labor, and you need to include a fair labor price. You can't say like, okay, well, I'll pay myself $10 an hour and account for that. No, because in Maine, you can't pay $10 an hour. That's not even the minimum wage. So you have to allow for that, allow for payroll taxes, even if you're not paying, to just understand what those costs are and factor those in. And then you have to look at, like, do you have enough margin for promotion? So a retailer, promotion will drive trial. So if you think yourself like you've ever seen a new product in a store and it's on sale, you're more likely to give it a try because it's on sale. And you want to make sure you have enough margin for that promotion, knowing that it will eat into your margin, but you don't want it to cost you to be able to promote. Another good thing is to understand distributors do not sell no matter what they tell you. They pick up your product and they deliver your product. That's it, nothing more. Full stop on that one. Understand you don't have to say yes to every channel. Like, your product you might be doing really, really well with direct to consumer. Why would you go through distribution if you don't have to? And you can sell wholesale on Fair, or have a few direct relationships that you ship to, and that's perfectly fine. It's really what works for you and understanding what works for you. And when you're doing your pricing, also price to today's COGS, right? Not your future COGS. I made that mistake early on, thinking, oh, well, my COGS will come down because I'll be more efficient, so I should price for futures. No, because I was not able to pay myself for 4 years. Not an easy time. So another way to look at your margin, if we look at the slide here, is a blended margin, right? So this blended margin is 42%, and this is as if you're selling equally to consumer, to wholesale, to distributor, and you honestly need a higher margin than that. You should be shooting for a 50% blended margin. Now that could be, again, you might only have one distributor and that might only be 15% of your business, and then your blended margin is going to be higher. So, that is just something to really wrap your head around and get good at, of understanding that. Okay, let's see. Okay, congratulations, you're on the shelf at the retailer. Now what? Many times you'll hear that getting on the shelf is easy compared to getting off the shelf, and none of it, it's hard. There's no doubt about it. It's hard getting on the shelf. It's getting more and more competitive out there. There are new brands coming on the market all the time, and thus the importance of understanding your brand identity and who you are, and understanding it's more than just features of your product. And I touched earlier, velocity, what it is and why does it matter. If you want to stay on that store shelf, you have to move. Your product has to have those turns. And a good example is when we first went into Whole Foods, we went in with 3 flavors. The cranberry almond and the savory fig and thyme did really, really well. The wild blueberry did not. It was not a good seller. We did not want to lose that slot, right? Because the more visibility of of products you have on the shelf, the more likely the consumer is going to see you. So I was just in the process and just about finalizing the olive and sitar, and we had let them know that that was coming in another 2 months, and they agreed to swap those out, right? So we didn't lose the slot, we just changed the flavor so that we could keep that. So keeping an eye on those velocities, and then you say, well, getting that information is really expensive. Like none of us could afford, it's called Nielsen data, right? So this is the data that tracks all the sales across any retailer that is doing more than $2 million in business annually. And you can see how you're doing compared to your competitors, which is really great, but that costs tens of thousands of dollars. So we went through a program with Maine Center for Entrepreneurs, and they were able to pull data. They get data, and were able to share some of that data with us, which was really helpful to understand, that we were doing better than we thought. But before we got that data, we were tracking loosely our velocity. Like when we would restock Hannaford's, we knew how many each Hannaford store was getting each time, and we had been there 2 weeks. So we sort of extrapolated from that, like what our turns were based on what we restocked with. When we would ship to retailers, right? We would have, maybe they were buying every 2 weeks. So, or maybe it was a big order once a month. So, that was another way to kind of estimate what your turns are. And then you use that data, to help you until you have the other data that you can get from maybe a group like MCE. Promotions, I mentioned, they're typically 15 to 20%, and you usually have two options: off invoice or at the register. If you can and the distributor allows, then I would definitely do an at the register, because with off invoice, you will have distributors that will, or retailers even, that will stock up on your product while it's on sale. And then they will not order again for a while because they stocked up. And so if it's a promotion at the register, that means you're only getting charged back for the actual product sold. So that's a much better way if you can. Not all of them allow it. Shelf talkers, again, an inexpensive way to attract attention. Not all retailers allow them on their shelves, but if you can get on the shelf, if they do allow it, it's just one more way for, what is a message that you could get to your core consumer that would resonate with them. And then repeat orders, not once, but 2 or 3 times from a customer to confirm that you have market validation. So if you're already, selling in the farmer's market and you're seeing those repeat customers come to you, you're getting that market validation. And, it's just a matter of like, how do you take it from there, into the retailer? And is that the right path for you? Or are you going to sell e-commerce, direct to consumer, or sell on something like a platform like Fair? So anyway, I'm hoping I didn't miss anything because I didn't have my notes. Let me see.
Couldn't tell you didn't have your notes at all. It was great.
So good. So interesting.
All right, let me see how I get out of this and not.
Here we go.
Here we are. Hello. So,
Karen, that
I'll
was
be
so.
saving this recording and using it myself.
The whole time I got notes all over the place.
okay, good.
I wanted to. Do you mind if I share two quick things? So got really excited, and I meant to send this to you and to Steve as well. But in January, I knew that that Maine Crisp that was scaled nationally, but I also sort of, in your brain you think nationally, but maybe like in Pennsylvania, like I don't know, Virginia, maybe on the East Coast. I did a trip with friends to Taos, New Mexico, And I went into the food co-op in Taos, and I took that picture in January of 2025, and I was so excited, and I meant to send this to you both. I was like, the like most, like just such a surprise also to
Yeah,
walk in. There weren't that many products that were of
yeah.
that nature on the shelf, and I just thought to myself, wow, that's incredible, really. So congratulations on that success of taking Maine and really like helping to champion the brand value of Maine outside of the state. And I know and maybe you could even talk to that a little bit, Karen, about you talked a little bit about like the push and pull of Maine and like I feel like I remember hearing one of you say before that there was like some folks who advised not to use Maine at all because it
Yeah,
was such a like kind of specific regional
right.
connotation
And
to it.
nobody would care.
Right. And how do how did you ultimately come to that determination? Was it just through like talking to people at food shows and, other things that made
Some
that
of it, but
happen?
it also came from us and our dairy experience in cheese making in Vermont,
Yeah.
right? Vermont is fantastic at promoting itself. And you would have people be like, oh Vermont, right? And when we came to Maine, I almost felt like I'm like, Maine just is too quiet. It needs to it has so much to offer. And when we heard that, like nobody would care. But when we did trade shows outside of Maine and we're in Philadelphia and the number of people that came up to the booth when because we were on a corner was just amazing, telling us their story and their connection. And, we were told that again and again, it'll never sell. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about Maine outside of maybe Massachusetts, right? Like that was it. That was what
Yeah.
we were told. And we're like, I don't know that I believe that because I've seen Vermont do it.
Right.
And I think there's such an affinity for Maine and people connected to it and that guy we've learned since then was just really super grumpy about everything.
Right.
Is what he told us.
Well, it's like trying to read it's hard because and the other thing that I think is such a appropriate business like lesson that you shared around the fact that the co-op had sold one bag, and
Yeah.
then you're there and you sell 47. There's a thing that happens in sales that it feels to me like you can trick yourself into identifying the wrong problem really easily. And then
Hmm.
because you think it's that thing, it becomes that thing. It's like the self-fulfilling prophecy to some degree. It's
Yes.
like, you justify why that, they must be too expensive. We only sold one bag. Like that's got to be
Right.
the reason. It's got to be cost. But, that you can end up, I feel like that's something I've experienced in the past is like you say, oh, it's got to be this thing, or someone tells you it's that thing, and you're like, okay, well, I must be that. And then you realize maybe it's actually not that thing. And it really, of course, isn't if you sell 47 bags,
Right.
directly after that. So I think that's just such a good thing to keep in mind is to not trick yourself into thinking or necessarily jumping to a conclusion about what the problem is to begin with.
Yeah. Well, as soon as I saw them on the shelf and on the bottom there, I'm like, well, there you go. Well, I hear you. I don't know. We'll see if I agree with you when we're done with the demo. Because it's just like and I had another retailer did the same thing where they were like, oh, we're going to put them up front, we're going to show them here, we're going to display them so people see and they're new. And I went in like again like 3 4 weeks later and I didn't see them in the front. And I looked on the cracker shelf, I didn't see them there, and I was like, this is great, did they sell them all? This is
Yeah.
amazing. And so I looked all over the store and couldn't find them, so I finally asked somebody and she's like, oh, yeah, I know where they are. She takes me all the way to the back of the store. We turn and come up the pasta aisle, and beside the red sauce, there they are on the bottom shelf. I'm like, never going to sell here. They're not even in with their companion crackers, right? Like, it just like, but you just have to work with them because you can't be like, well, that's you can't say what you want to say.
I I think it's
Just
also
to encourage them, right? And
it's like incredible to see that evolution too, and like starting with I remember visiting your facility, even after you would come to like the new spot,
mhm.
you were using the ham slicer to cut the buckwheat crackers, by
Oh yeah.
hand, each one of them. And
Yeah.
then to get to that scale where obviously, you weren't necessarily standing all day with the deli slicer, but like to be in touch with your product in the early stages and understand it, really intimately, and then be able to scale it and keep the integrity of the product, on the shelves is really a pretty remarkable thing too.
No, thank you. Yeah. Well, help from the team. It became a team, and it was
Yeah.
not a one-woman show. And our daughter Claire like took that and ran production and was great. And I see you, Aaron. Hi. Aaron worked for Maine Crisp for a while too.
Nice.
Can I say, Carrie, when you saying talking about sampling things at shows, you're like,
Mhm.
no eating, no sitting. I just got an instant flashback to us at Common Ground. You're just booth bunny, and I'm sitting there shelling beans, reclining in a lawn chair. So, is shelling beans acceptable show behavior?
It is because it brought people over to you curious to what you were doing, right?
Good.
Like you were doing something. It was like you were the demo.
Yeah, right.
Do folks have other questions? Any thoughts?
I have something that's not so much a question, it's more of a comment, but it's just interesting because I was interested in the packaging because I'm like a
Mhm.
visual arts kind of person. And as
Mhm.
I was just looking through that slide, I couldn't figure out why, but it like as you progress through, it started to look more savory and less sweet. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
and I was like looking at that. Why is that doing that? Just the colors changing. It's
Right.
very interesting. It started to read like, yeah, I don't know. There's something about that, the cranberry color, which even though it has cranberry in it, that just
Yeah.
started to read like sweeter in the beginning and then more like a cracker. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. And because people would get confused sometimes, right? Is it a cookie? Is it a biscuit? What is it? Like they weren't always sure.
Amazing.
Hmm.
Well, feel free to interrupt me if anyone has questions, but I just put a link in the chat for a one-on-one sessions later today. If you want to
Okay.
15 or 30 minutes with Karen. I don't remember exactly how long those time slots were, but feel free to hit that link and sign up for any available slots.
Yeah. And how do I do that so that I show up and
We'll
you
send
don't
you the
call
I'll
me?
send you a link.
You
Yeah.
and Karen?
we'll send you the Zoom link, and I'll stop our recording here. But thank you so much, Karen. This was,
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
it's relevant beyond food, as well. Like for anybody
Right.
interested in anything that helps to champion brand. And I love, thinking about it. Again, people think brand, they think logo and design, but of course, it's like, what are you representing? How does it represent you and your product and who you want to be as a company and, the audience and the individual profiles of those people through the piece. And I feel like that's, of course, like a in some ways, for larger companies, it's a luxury when you have a creative director who can take you through those individual things. But as a small
Hmm.
business, you can do that work too. It's just a matter of understanding how to go about doing it. And I feel like you did such a great job at helping us to understand that. So thank you for taking the time,
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Thank you.
I'll stop our recording.